Welcome to Gay on Purpose podcast. My name is David DeVore. Join me for deep dive conversations with quite a variety of gay men about some of the unique challenges of gay life that we don't normally talk about, and how those challenges can be the pathway to powerful gifts. Hunter Donia, I'm so excited to have you on Gay on Purpose, which I know I've talked to you about quite a bit.
Dude, I am so excited to be here. The fact that you are doing this is like, it's been a long time coming, and all of us have been rooting you on to do it. And it's just been so beautiful to see you get it started. So I'm so happy to be a part of it. It's so
Thank
exciting.
you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your support. You've been so incredibly supportive, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, dude.
I usually like to start the podcast by asking a little bit about your experience as a kid, or, you know, at what point did you discover that you were different, or that you were different than the other kids, other boys?
Yeah. So for me personally, with my journey, I feel like I do remember being different, like, which I feel like is like the classic story. I feel like I hear a lot of other gay men say the same thing, but like they always like knew that there was something different about them from a very young age. I recall being like on the playgrounds like during recess, and I went to a Christian school from like kindergarten through, or no, like preschool through like first grade. And it was one of those grades I remember being on the playground and being like, I wish I was a girl so I could like play with the other girls and like not be like judged for it or whatever it may be, like something along those lines, in a much more kid version, like crying to the teacher who was like watching over us during that recess hour. Right. I remember that happening. And I also very much often remember like naturally wanting to like play with all of like the girlier toys whenever we were like at Target and we were like shopping for new toys. And it's not that I didn't enjoy like the more traditionally, you know, masculine toys such as like race cars and stuff like that, but it's like I also wanted like the pink girly stuff too. And I was always so nervous and so scared to like ask for it from my parents as much as I really wanted to.
Right.
So I always like knew that there was something different about me. And like, as I got older as a child, I learned more and more, I guess, that like was something that would often, it felt like something that I became more and more ashamed of, and something that I felt like I very much like repressed for a while, until like 7th grade, I think it was. I remember one night, it was so random, like being on a Skype call with my best friend Megan. Because at the time, me and my friends would all like video chat on Skype to keep up with each other. But my best friend Megan, since like 2nd grade. And I just remember it just like hitting me like a ton of bricks that night for whatever random reason. And I just looked at her over the Skype video and being like, Megan, like, I think I'm gay. Like, I think I like boys. Like, I think it is what it is.
Yeah, that's amazing at that age to not only have that discovery, but to be able to articulate it.
Well, and I think that at the time, you know, I'm 26 for reference for everybody who's listening to this.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too.
Yeah, and I think that I'm so privileged as a gay man to have grown up in the generation that I have, because I had so much access to information and being able to see other people in the community being themselves openly and freely online. So like, for like at the time, I remember like YouTube was a big thing, like was starting to become a big thing. And I remember like Jeffree Star was like way back then in a different light. I don't love Jeffree Star now, but back in the day, Jeffree Star was like a big person that I like really followed and was obsessed with and like kind of looked up to. And like Gigi Gorgeous back in the day was somebody who I was really obsessed with. And being able to see like other people who were expressing themselves like that, it allowed me to even like think about discovering that about myself, I guess, or like inspired me in one way or another, and I understand, like, I feel like I'm very privileged to be able to have been able to see any of that, to be able to come to that discovery as young as I was.
Yes. Because it was completely different for me growing up in the 70s, where there wasn't any representation, where there may have been some characters on TV, but they tended to be the clown, the fop, the comic relief,
right,
and weren't taken very seriously. And so I to me, I can't even imagine living in a world where there was a Will and Grace, or
Right.
where there was representation and role models. So I think that that's fantastic. And I really think that the generational differences are interesting. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, because within gay culture, sometimes there's a misunderstanding between the old gays and the younger gays.
Yeah,
And I hear
sure.
a lot of younger guys saying like, those old gays are really fucked up. They don't know, they're messed up. They've all got problems. And then older guys tend to think that the younger guys don't appreciate what they have because we
Totally.
paved the way for it or something. And so there can be this misunderstanding. Has that been your experience with older gay men, or with gay men in general?
I
Seeing
mean,
differences?
I think it's like two things can be true, that like we're all gay and we all experience our own version of what that looks like for us as far as our traumas and tribulations,
Yeah,
and that's going to reflect in all of us in different ways but also similar ways. And I think that the way that we grew up and the time that we grew up in is going to shape that in whatever way it will. But I think, like, yes, absolutely, I feel like what I will say is that I agree that I don't oftentimes, in conversations with my peers who are my age, who are a part of the community, I don't oftentimes hear them speaking of older generation gay people as like, or I guess like recognizing the privilege that they have to be growing up in this generation that we have now. I think
right.
that it is oftentimes that I think that we forget that and we take it for granted
Hmm.
often. But
Yep.
then I also think on the flip side, I think where maybe younger gay people may be getting the, I don't know, misconception or the perspective of older gays and whatever those negative connotations may be about them. I mean, it's just because we've all had to go through messed up shit, and we all
Right.
have our own shit that we're carrying, and we unfortunately, I think, have a bad habit of projecting it onto each other,
Right.
as
That's
you talk
really
about a lot.
true. That's really
So
true. I talk about that a lot, that we tend to sort of project our own stuff, our own unresolved and our sexuality, our own issues onto each other within the community.
yeah.
I just think that it's really interesting, in terms of the generational differences, that a lot of times, older gay men will make assumptions that it's easier for a younger gay man. And
Mm,
because I work with gay men of all different ages, I recognize that isn't true. That consciousness is evolving at a very slow rate, and we've
yeah,
made tremendous strides, but there still is a struggle. People are still being bullied. There still is
absolutely.
suffering that's happening, and that we need to be aware of that as well. That it's not just everything is clear. Because living in a city in Chicago, I don't think about my sexuality at all. I don't. I'm just a gay man. I've been gay for a very long time,
Right.
and yet 3 hours south in Southern Illinois, I work with a man who's in an incredibly different situation in terms of the environment, and that we have to recognize that, we still are, we're still making the strides, that there still is bullying that goes on out there. Did you
Absolutely.
experience a lot of that, for like in high school, or in terms of your life?
So, as far as like bullying goes, I feel like I was privileged to have grown up in an area, or like with other kids at least, that I felt like were a little bit more open minded, or a lot of like the girls specifically were fairly supportive of me, particularly after I came out. Before I came out, though, it was not like that at all. Very much bullied for being different. And I remember like sharing those feelings with my parents and feeling like I didn't really have a solution for it, because I didn't know like why I was different, or I didn't have like a name for it, I guess, at the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And I think that coming out for me was so empowering, because I was able to say like, oh, I am different because I'm gay, and like
Right.
being able to have a definition and being able to kind of like hold it with power and
Yeah.
say like, this is what it is, this is who I am. And so now, like, instead of me being different and weird and that being a bad thing, I looked at my sexuality as something that's just a part of me and something that I had to accept about myself. And that was kind of, it was kind of like the way I explain it is like, yeah, I like pink, I'm gay, so what now? Like,
Right, right.
so what's
That's
the
a
problem?
wonderful that's a wonderful way to have experienced it, because for a lot of guys it takes a lot more time to accept ourselves more radically and just say, "Oh, this is what is. This is who I am. This is amazing. Here we go."
Totally. And I that's not to say that like once I came out, so yes, once I came out, I feel like I grew up in a pretty privileged situation where I didn't have to face a lot of adversity in the face of that.
Yeah.
However, there definitely still was. And it was mostly behind closed doors, not a lot of the time to my face, but it definitely was still prevalent, but not as prevalent as I feel like a lot of other people have had to go through with it. But like I remember freshman year, like multiple like older guys in like in the older grades were like talking about how they just like wanted to beat me up for like no reason. And like all the girls would just like come to my rescue, and like they would all like stand up for me, and they wouldn't even like let it get to me.
Right, right.
So it was really, I'm very, grateful to women. Shout out to women who are allies out there. Very much so.
Yeah.
We could not live without them, and we would not
Yeah,
be able to be where we are
definitely.
today
That is
without them
definitely true.
at all.
Yeah.
And people would like make fun of me behind my back, and I still had to work through like a lot of my own fear of still like showing up as who I wanted to be and how I wanted to present myself. That doesn't mean that I didn't end up like actually doing it. I felt the fear and I felt the uncomfortability, and I did it anyway, because the pain of like not being myself and the pain of just like hiding and like out of fear versus like the pain of the temporary uncomfortability of other people may not be accepting of that. It was kind of like it was worth going and being uncomfortable and being myself instead, and feeling that versus the pain of not just being myself every day.
Yeah, and that's a big difference in my experience in the early 80s, desperately trying to be accepted and really dimming my light in so many ways and not really being authentic
Right.
in order to please other people and in order to not get bullied. And I was getting bullied my freshman year as well for being gay. Which was terrifying, because I thought that the mask that I had created was working really well up until that point.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, they can see me. But I think it's so powerful that you were able to begin to embrace it and to wear the things that you wanted to wear and to do what you wanted to do. And I have to say that I think this is one of the greater gifts of being gay, that so many times in these challenges of being different, that gifts emerge for us, and that through the challenges, we often sort of rise up and our vibration rises up, and we have to learn to radically love ourselves.
Yes.
Moving through it. And this is what I see with you, that, that this has made you stronger, that it's made you more powerful.
Yeah.
Are there any specific gifts that you think that you've received? I know that you're a very creative person. Are there any specific gifts other than what we've already been talking about in terms of being gay that you've noticed?
Well, I think that going back to like working through discomfort and maybe people like accepting the fact that like some people just aren't going to like who you are, and for whatever their dumb reasons are, and that is okay, has definitely really set me up for a lot of success to where I am now.
Yeah.
I'm a public figure at this point and within my niche, within my industry.
Yes.
And so I go and speak on stages, and I post on social media very liberally with like myself as a personal brand.
Right.
And I think that I would not have been able to do any of that with the confidence and courage that I had learned from that I present myself with now, if I had not been gay and had to first, like from a very young age, work through figuring out how to even do that, like the same feeling that I get before, like I go on stage and I deliver a class to like hundreds of people, is the same feeling that I got when I was in 7th grade and I was deciding whether or not I wanted to wear makeup to school or not,
Right.
And so like, I think that has very much set me up for success in what I'm specifically doing now. And I think that it has also put me, just into the entire path of how I've grown and where I've gone in with my career up until this point, which I am so personally incredibly grateful for. Like the fact that I ended up in the beauty industry, and the fact that I was able to, develop a beautiful career for myself, make an impact in other people's lives in a small way by just doing services. But now, like, empower other service providers to then make their own impacts in their own communities, like that is such a blessing to me. And I also don't believe that would have happened if I wasn't gay. And not only that, but I am teaching like business education, and that's the majority of my focus. But within everything that we do, the number one core value of our company is diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And I have a whole course on LGBTQ plus inclusivity for salons and stylists as well. And so to be able to have the privilege of like being where I am now, which I would not have been here if I wasn't gay, right? And then being able to empower those other service providers within a medium that I absolutely love and I've fallen in love with those tools to be able to make their communities feel safer and have a really safe space to go to is so beautiful. And it's like, if it wasn't for me being who I am, like that wouldn't have happened. And
exactly. And it's amazing that you've been able to embrace all of those things and those gifts and make it a part of your purpose and make it a part of the meaning of your own life in terms of what you're here to contribute, and bringing it all together in the same room. Yeah. And I think it's an incredibly powerful place to be.
Yeah. I remember I had come out like in 7th grade, and then after that I had been doing a pretty good, interesting job of just like exploring myself and who I was and expressing myself. But on the flip side of that, like academically, I wasn't doing very well, and my ADHD was very much starting to develop and show up in like crappy ways. And so I wasn't doing very well in school, and I didn't find a lot of places where as far as like activities go, I guess, or like extracurriculars where I like really felt like I fit in. And I remember figuring out that they had a vocational cosmetology program, and I had already been like expressing myself with like coloring my hair every week and with like horrible, disgusting box color and doing my makeup in all different types of crazy ways. And I was like, maybe this is something that would be like interesting thing for me that I'd be passionate about, and maybe I do excel at, because I was not excelling in other places at the time. And I remember walking into that room my sophomore year and feeling like it was the very first place where I felt celebrated for who I was. Not just accepted, not just like tolerated, but like celebrated for who I was and how I was expressing myself creatively. And that has like rung true until this day. And that's why I'm like forever in debt to that industry. And then, like I said before, like to these women as well too, because they have been really like my biggest cheerleaders up to this point.
Right. And that's so important to have that kind of support, and, that you were able to find it and make that connection, and then to feel so empowered within that system.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of your development, that you received a lot of support along the way. I was curious about how your parents responded, or coming out to them, their thoughts about it, their feelings.
Yeah. So I remember I came out okay, so at the time, like 7th grade, it was like Facebook was kind of like it was mostly for like college kids, and also like younger kids were getting into it as well. And like none of our parents were on Facebook at the time at all. And so I remember posting a Facebook status like coming out, and that was like to my entire like grade basically.
Right.
And my parents didn't know for like a whole year after that, which was wild. I have no idea how they didn't figure it out, because my entire school knew. Right. And it wasn't until a year later, me and my mom, my mom was like driving me to drop me off for Friday night ice skating that me and my friends would go every Friday. And for some reason, we got into a fight about like, I don't know, cleaning my room or something. And we get to the ice skating rink, and right before I got out of the car, I'm like, well, guess what, Mom? I'm gay. And then I like slammed the door on her.
Oh my God.
And then I slammed the door on her, and then she texts me and she's like, Hunter, I know you're gay. I don't care. Clean your room, or like something like that.
That's great.
Yeah. So then,
so funny.
Unfortunately, she told my dad without me like, having my own process with that, unfortunately. But my dad was totally cool with it, apparently. And that was all fine and dandy. But what did not become fine and dandy was how I was expressing myself on the outside to my parents. So they didn't care that I was gay, like at all, but they cared very much about like my safety and my success as a child, right?
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, like when it came to me like dressing up more femininely and like coloring my hair and wearing makeup and all that stuff like that, that's where me and my parents had a really big clashing of I don't know, just like a lot of arguments. And I didn't talk to my mom for a year at a certain point when I was a kid because my parents were divorced. So I was able to kind of like pick and choose who I wanted to stay with and who I wanted to communicate with.
Right.
And my dad would like call me really shitty names when I would like walk downstairs in like whatever crazy outfit I was in. And that was definitely way more of a challenge than the actual sexual orientation. It was much more how I wanted to present myself.
Right.
And at now looking back, you know, for me, and I don't think there's any excuse for like making your child feel the way that I was made to be felt for these reasons. However, I do understand where they were coming from, which is like why I'm able to kind of like forgive them and like love them and understand that they were just doing the best that they could with what they knew at the time. I understand that like they just want the best for me. They want me to be safe. Like my mom was nervous I was going to go out and like get like beat up, you know, which is like a completely fair concern.
Right.
But at the time, you know, the way that they would go about expressing those concerns obviously was not very great. Like it was very harmful and not okay and not good for my mental health. Now we're in the long run. And it wasn't until, and this is another reason why I'm completely in debt to, you know, my industry. It wasn't until I joined my cosmetology program and they saw me being like celebrated within that space. And then also I got a job at a salon on my 16th birthday. Was my first day. And this was like a very professional, big salon within my area. Like it was a high ticket, like very nice salon that somehow, some way took a chance on my crazy little ass. I walked in there looking wild and I have no idea why they hired me. I was the youngest person that they hired. And it wasn't until they were able to see me thriving within that environment and like the other stylists there being like, oh my God, we love Hunter and we love getting to see what he wears every day. And we love his makeup and how he does it. Like, and all that stuff. It wasn't until they saw me like thriving in a traditional environment, I guess, until that's like what took them coming around to me, just showing up as who I wanted to show up as, because I think they felt a little bit more security in the fact that like, okay, Hunter can do this and be okay. You know, so that's what really saved me. And my relationship with my parents was like, again, this industry, which is, I know this is not the podcast for it, but I just can't stop talking about it because it's such a big part of my journey is like getting into hair, you know?
Definitely. There was a time in my life that I wish that I could have done something like that or been a designer. And, you know, I had an aptitude for design. I still do. But I was afraid. I was afraid to do it. My mom had a really good friend who was an interior designer. And when I was a freshman in high school, she asked my mom if she thought that I might like to apprentice with her. And my mom asked me, and I was like, no way. I would get, like, they would kill me. I would be killed if anyone knew that I was doing that. So I really admire that you have been able to find your niche and just step right into it and not to be apologetic about it, but to know that it's empowering and that you've had such a good experience with it, that it's been so nurturing for you.
And you know, I just think it's important to make sure that I recognize the privilege that I have again, you know, like to be able to have that option. Like hearing that really puts things into perspective for me, where it was like, yes, it was an option where it was like, you know, my mom fought me on it to go to vocational school. She was like, well, if you do that, then you're getting kicked out at 18. And then also just like the hair part of it and stuff like that. It was like a little bit of a struggle, but definitely not nearly as much as what it may have been at a different time. So again, just acknowledging how privileged I am to be able to have had that option.
Yes. And something that I really admire about you is that I think that as human beings, that the objective is to balance masculine and feminine energies and to welcome masculine and feminine gifts. And for me, when I have observed you and worked with you, I think of you as having this wonderful balance of masculine and feminine, and really knowing yourself and expressing yourself the way that you want to express yourself. And I was wondering if within the gay community you feel comfortable expressing yourself in masculine, feminine combinations, or whether you feel that you have to sort of do the man drag to be out in the community or change who you are in some way to feel more accepted within our own community.
Yeah, I think that that's always been, and you probably know this just from working with me, but I think that's always been the part of my shame, I guess, or my fear around like being openly who I am. Like that's where it really shows up is within the gay community. It's like
Right.
it's almost like I care so much about so much more about the approval of other gay men than I do anybody else. Like
Right.
it's so fascinating. And I don't know if I could necessarily put my finger on it on why. I guess like for me, I've kind of come to a point where it was like I just am uncomfortable with men, period, just because of the experience that I've had with them all my life.
Yeah.
But like, I also kind of logically understand, like, well, if a straight man doesn't like me for being gay, I really don't give a shit. Like, this person isn't offering any value to my life. Like, there's nothing
Right.
I can gain from this person. So, like, why does it matter? But with gay men, I think it's what's different is like, there's things that, like, I can find in other gay men that I appreciate and that I want in my life, such as friendship and, you know, understanding that nobody else can understand. And then, of course, like romance, love, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think for me, it's been really difficult for me to unravel my shame around my femininity with other gay men because I feel like, you know, a general perspective is or expectation is like masculine men are more attractive, you know? And so it's still definitely to this day, like something that I continuously work on, is not like hiding who I am and just like fully showing up with whoever I am, whether you want to call it feminine or masculine or not, just like showing up as Hunter
Yeah.
in like dating situations or in social situations with other gay men. It's very difficult for me, very much so.
Yeah, I really, I mean, from my experience with you, you are a hunter. I mean, like, and that's what we want to be. We want to be as authentic and unique as we can, and let that light shine without, trying. Because on the other side of the coin would be someone who is gay, who is trying to be like other gays, or
Right.
trying to be, you know, cool with, either suppressing, dressing more masculine or becoming more feminine,
Yeah.
maybe, and creating sort of an affect that isn't their authentic personality anymore. And you found this really wonderful, balance of everything, I think, that makes you unique. And, in the work that I do, this is something that I really want to promote in individuals is being able to, within the community, be yourself.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with it. I do man drag all the time. And it's
Totally.
just been recently that I've been, and we've talked about this, but, I've been dressing the way that I really want to dress and wearing clothes that I want to wear instead of feeling like I have to stay in a flannel shirt and jeans all the time in
Right.
order to be accepted. It's
Yeah.
like, it's empowering to be able to express yourself in a room full of people that seem so homogenous and ironic. And,
Yep.
in terms of being gay, you would think that we would be more supportive of each other and really supportive of unique expressions and unique ways of presenting. And yet, just like you said, I think that there still is this heteronormative idea of what masculinity is, and that as gay men, we give it a tremendous amount of power in terms
Yes.
of what is attractive and what isn't. Of course, that's not true for everybody,
No.
right? Because everybody likes different things. But it is interesting to me that we kind of put ourselves through that struggle within our own community,
For
and
sure.
that you, for example, would feel maybe more comfortable in a different context out at a club that's straight than you might feel at a gay club.
Sure. 100%. And I think like the reason is because when we were younger and we're like hiding who we are with everything that we possibly can, or we're being judged for our more feminine qualities, we as gay men are that much more hyper focused and aware about these gender roles and like what we are accepted as being from everybody, you know, and what allows us to fit in more comfortably when we act this way versus this way. And we bring in all of that trauma and all of those behaviors and habits and things that we've learned from those unfortunate circumstances like into our own community. And I
Yeah.
think like self-awareness and you know the active like work of like wanting to create a great environment for yourself and the other people around you, and then also like the next generation of queer people who are going to be coming in before us as well, I think is really important, you know?
Oh,
I mean, because it shows
definitely.
up in myself, you know, like the masculine versus feminine situation. Like for me and what I look to be attracted to and like who I want to fit in with, et cetera, like it absolutely shows up in myself, and I have my own biases around it. And it's like a way that I'm like reflecting it
Yeah.
out at other people, and I have to be super self-aware of that, and because I know that it can cause harm, because I've been on the other side of it too, you know?
Yeah. Because it can, you know, it's interesting the way that people process their sexuality. And I always say it's a lot of times we're living and growing up kind of in fight or flight mode, and we develop strategies. And one could be to become very mean and cynical,
Yeah.
you know, and we see that sort of, we call like the mean girls, the mean gays, that,
Right.
you know, that their defense mechanism has become angry and cynical. And, and and I think that there's a real difference in when we talk about feminine, masculine, um, with femininity, that bitchiness isn't a feminine trait. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yes,
And yet
absolutely.
it's sort of is celebrated as being something, you know, comedic or powerful out there in the world. And yet it can be really harming to other people.
Absolutely.
If, you know, when you go to gay parties and you know, I was at Fire Island once, and everyone was just really being mean to each other, saying really mean things. And it almost, within gay culture, it can almost be condoned that it's all right to behave that way.
Right.
And I think it's so sad. I remember at one point I was like, why is everyone so mean in this
Like,
house?
what the hell's
And they were
going
like,
on?
oh, shut up, girl. You know, like there was no room for it. And that's what I like about you, is that you're leading with kindness, and that's the most important thing. It's, you know, it really is about being comfortable enough with yourself to be open to other people and to not feel so defensive all the time, right?
Yeah. And be
Um,
self-aware and like be open to like other people calling out your behavior as well
yeah,
too.
yeah, definitely. This is great. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. This is perfect for the
Me too,
podcast.
David. I am so grateful to you and all the work that you're doing, and the help that you've given me. Very much so. You've helped me navigate the craziness of exploring my sexuality after like my 5-year relationship where I didn't really have to for a while.
Right?
Particularly when it comes to like dating and connections with other gay men, you've helped me so much in being a lot more courageous and comfortable with myself within those spaces. And that's really allowed me to enjoy my life on a different level than I don't think I would have been able to otherwise if it wasn't for your help. So
Oh,
I
thank you
appreciate you
so
and what you're
much. I
doing.
appreciate that so much, Hunter. You have no idea. That's why I do what I do. That's the intention. So I'm glad that you experienced it that way.